Hi guys, so we're up to chapter 6 on Twice Magic with the Wizards of Once. I have a bit of an irritating tickle in my throat, so I'm liable to start coughing. Bear with me. I do have a drink. Here we go. Chapter 6, and a little more chaotic still. Indeed, it could be. The invisible assailant slowly became visible in front of Wish's eyes, as the iron of the soldiers surrounding him made whatever invisibility spell he was using wear off. It was the wizard boy, Zar, son of Encanso. "Zar!" exclaimed Wish, completely forgetting where they both were in her delight at seeing her old friend again. But what are you doing here? I'm saving you, even though you've completely sabotaged my mission," shouted Zar. "That tricky wretch of a wizard boy!" gasped Queen Sycorax. Zar, you see, had gone to considerable trouble to get into Iron Warrior Fort. He needed his spelling book. Caliburn had begged him not to involve Wish in all this trouble, but Zar had said he would just sneak in and take back the spelling book without her realizing. Everything had initially gone to plan. He had got through the wall by the simple trick of approaching the gate wearing Queen Sycorax's hooded cloak, which he had stolen from her 6 months ago. Queen Sycorax had made a habit of wearing these spectacular cloaks that didn't show her face, so she could come and go through her own wall without people recognizing her. Zar passed through the gate, unchallenged by the sentries, the sprites hidden underneath the folds of fabric. It took a while for them to find Wish, creeping through the corridors of the fort, using invisibility spells and lurking in quiet corridors. When Wish and Bodkin had run out of the schoolroom, they had been followed by an invisible Zar and his sprites. Zar had tripped Wish up at the bottom of the stairs so that the once sprite and Squeeze Juice could search her pockets for the spelling book. But once they were in the courtyard, all the surrounding iron had turned them both visible, and by the time Wish had reached the royal stage, it didn't seem a very good moment for the sprites to escape. Tiffin-Storm and Hunky Punk were all for leaving Wish to fend for herself when the witch smeller accused her of being a witch. But Zar was determined to stick to his resolution to be good. He couldn't abandon Wish, particularly when it was his sprites in her pockets that had got her into trouble. So he made his invisible charge at the witch smeller, only to be tackled to the ground by Bodkin, the bodyguard, who mistook Zar's drawn sword for the talon of a witch. But this was all the news to Wish, who hadn't realized any of this was going on. "Saving me? Sabotaged his mission? What is Zar talking about?" Blink, 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 blink. Out of nowhere, 6 sprites came blinking into visibility, and then blink, blink, blink. 3 smaller lights of the hairy fairies. Wish had been missing these sprites so badly, and at any other time she'd have been thrilled to see them, but right now? "I have to say, I don't really want to be unwelcoming, but this is a really, really bad moment for you to drop by," said Wish. This was the understatement of the Iron Age. The effect of a wizard boy, a talking raven, 6 sprites, and 3 hairy fairies rapidly appearing in an Iron Warrior fort full of blood-crazy magic hunters who have already been whipped into witch-finding frenzy by a barking mad witch smeller is a rather similar one to that of a large, plump, juicy chicken with 10 dear little yellow, fluffy baby chicks suddenly appearing in the middle of a pack of ravenous wolves who've had a bit of a lean streak lately. "A wizard and a witch companions!" shrieked the witch smeller. He really couldn't ever have seen a real witch if he thought a witch looked like Squeeze Juice, but the other magic hunters weren't in a mood to be picky about their species in identification, so they all joined in joyfully. "Get them!" they cried. Now this was a crisis. Queen Sycorax's warriors might rush to stop the magic hunters from seizing their unsatisfactory little princess, but they weren't going to do the same for Zar. Indeed, they might even join in. After meeting him 6 months ago, Zar wasn't exactly top of Queen Sycorax's Midwinter's End Eve present list. Yes, it was most definitely what you might call a crisis. But Wish, though she didn't look much like her mother, did in fact have a few things in common with Queen Sycorax. She was rather good in a crisis. Some might say cool. Collected. Tricky. If by tricky you mean clever. In that split second, when it became apparent that Tsar might be killed if she didn't come up with a pretty nifty solution right now, Wish reviewed her options. She was a bit hampered by the fact that no one had taught her how to use her magic properly, so these choices were a little limited. She could take her eye patch off entirely. That would make the castle fall down, which would create a diversion, but would also be dangerous and a little bit messy. She could use the spelling book to do a spell of invisibility or transformation. But Bodkin had the spelling book, and it would take way too much time for him to retrieve it, carefully hidden as it was beneath many layers of body armour. Or she could cast a spell that she had seen someone do before, or so she could copy it. Wish thought back to a spell 6 months ago when Tivin Storm had made Tsar's bedroom door shrug off out of its frame like an old man shrugging out of his jacket, and turned it into a flying door so it could escape from Wizard Fort. She wriggled up her eye patch just a tiny, tiny smidgen and looked up towards the Tower of Education. She imagined the door of the punishment cupboard. She knew that door very, very well. Gently shrugging out of its door frame in the same way as Tsar's bedroom door had done, she spelled out the word that Tivenstorm had said as she cast the spell. Mouve. Luckily, magic did not seem to care about the exact positioning of the letters. Indeed, it seemed to positively like creativity in the spelling department. It invigorated the magic like adding oxygen in some kind of chemical experiment. As the magic hunters thundered towards them, sword drawn, shouting, "Kill the witches!" Boom! Above their heads, the broken door of the punishment cupboard exploded out of the top window of the Tower of Education and rocketed at breathtaking speed, neck height, across the courtyard. Everybody had to stop charging towards Tsar and the sprites, misidentified as witches, and throw themselves on the ground for fear of being decapitated. The witch smeller rubbed his eyes and stared upward at the door sailing up into the air and turning around back again for another dive. "What is that?" whispered the witch smeller in a hollow voice of disbelief. "Seems to be a door, sir," said his sergeant smartly. "I know it's a door, you idiot," spat the witch smeller, "but what is it doing flying through the air like a bird?" The door came to a screeching maniac hovering halt in front of Tsar and Wish. "The wizard boy's kidnapping me!" shouted Wish, grabbing Tsar by the arm and dragging him onto the door. The sprites, already finding it difficult to fly because of all the iron around them, threw themselves down on the door beside them. Tsar grinned. Quick thinking, princess. Neither he nor the sprites could make this door fly themselves because the door had iron hinges and an iron lock. "How do I make it work?" panicked Wish. She'd never driven a flying door before. "Use the key," advised Caliburn. Without thinking, Wish put her hand on the key and then moved her arm back sharply as if she'd been stung, as the head of the key moved like a mouth, asking, "Where would you like to go?" In its cosy, creaky, upbeat little voice. "Up," said Wish. "We want to go up." She put her hand on the key again, a little more cautiously this time, and moved it gently upwards, and the door went shrieking up into the air, so wildly that all of them nearly fell off. "We'll have to go back for Bodkin," yelled Wish. "We cannot leave him there. My mother is hopping mad and she'll say it's all his fault for not looking after me." "Ha!" said Tsar. "Do we have to? He does kind of get in the way. If he wasn't for Bodkin interfering, I'd have smushed that horrible guy with the sniffing nose." I think Sir Bodkin might have the spelling book, boss," wheezed Squeezes. "It wasn't in Wish's pockets." "We go back for Bodkin," said Tsar, punching the air. Wish slammed the enchanted key to the right, and the door of the punishment cupboard veered violently round in a circle and made a great swooping dive back down again, sending everyone who was beginning to get back onto their stomachs for the second time. Tsar and Wish both had to lean over and drag Bodkin onto the door, such was the heaviness of his armour. "Nobody shoot, or the princess will die!" shouted Wish over the side of the door as it sailed up into the air, a little shakily because of Bodkin's weight, and swooped backwards and forwards over the crowd. The only person who was still standing on the royal stage was Queen Sycorax. She would have died rather than throw herself on her stomach. Nonetheless, she was rattled. Very, very rattled. The situation had got thoroughly out of hand. She waved her sword up at the door, shouting not with her usual cool, for Queen Sycorax had lost her temper. "Come down immediately, Wish! A warrior princess does not fly about on the back of doors. A warrior princess does not allow herself to get kidnapped." "Oh dear, she really is cross," said Wish, peering over the edge of the door. "I'm so glad we didn't leave you down there with her bodkin." "You're right. You don't allow yourself to be kidnapped, Mother," Wish shouted back down. "A kidnapping just happens." But Queen Sycorax was not fooled. She knew perfectly well who was kidnapping who. "Do not, on any account, leave the safety of this fort," commanded Queen Sycorax. "Do not, on pain of my most severe displeasure, go over that wall." Take the usual look of disappointment on Queen Sycorax's face when she looked at her daughter, and then times that by about 10. And you'll have an idea of what Queen Sycorax looked like as she gazed up at Wish and her disreputable companions lying on their stomachs on the back of the flying door. "I'm so sorry, Mother," said Wish guiltily. "Don't worry. I'll be right back, I promise. I will." And then the door of the punishment cupboard sailed up, and away over the battlements and on towards Queen Sycorax's wall. Queen Sycorax gave a sigh of fury and resignation. Maddening though her daughter might be, she really did not want her shot down. She called up to the sentry on the Tower of Education, "Nobody shoot down the door. The princess is going over the wall." Excuse me a second. And the astonished cry went up from the sentry to sentry and tower to tower all along the fortifications and the battlements of Queen Sycorax's great wall. "Orders of the Queen! Nobody shoot down the door!" The wall of Queen Sycorax was supposed to be impregnable, unclimbable, unbreachable by witches, and everything magic. The arrow hands of those sentries were absolutely itching to shoot that door down as it sailed majestically and a little erratically over their heads, particularly when Tsar leaned over the side of it and gave them all a cheeky wave. But they were all far too scared to disobey orders. Queen Sycorax watched it go. She closed her eyes for a second as the door lurched wildly this way and that, went into nosedives several times before flying on over the forest. With her clumsy little daughter in charge, it really was going to be a miracle if they made it for more than 5 minutes through that forest without crashing. But in among all the anger in Sycorax's face, there was the blink of an emotion much more unusual for her. Fear. For she knew now that her daughter was in real and terrible danger. Tap, 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 went Queen Sycorax's furious little foot on the royal stage as the witch smeller and his magic hunters got cautiously to their feet, looking as though they felt a little at a disadvantage, for the Queen was the only one who had stayed standing throughout. Queen Sycorax's warriors remained where they were, curled up like little hedgehogs, their arms over their heads, for they knew that their queen was about to speak her mind, and it was better to lie low until she had. Queen Sycorax narrowed her eyes, and then she struck. Every single word a snake bite, dripping with poisonous sarcasm and contempt. "I hold you entirely responsible for this mess, you miserable little pest controller," flashed Queen Sycorax. "Thanks to your pathetic inability to follow orders and do your job, my daughter has left the protection of my castle and has been carried off into terrible danger because out there, beyond my wall, are real live witches. Not that you would know one if it bit you on the nose, and those real live witches are gonna be chasing my daughter and trying to kill her. And this is all your fault." The witch smeller's mouth opened and shut, and then he drew himself up and put his finger in the air for full scariness. He trembled with indignation. He had never met a woman so dreadful in all of his life. "None of this is my fault. It is you who is in big trouble, Queen Sycorax. You tried to cover up the fact that your daughter is an extremely dangerous, and is fraternising with evil magical elements. She was kidnapped, said Queen Sycorax, and there's no such thing as a fool, you unbalanced ignoramus. Shaking with fury, the Witch Smeller whirled round to face his magic hunters. In a swoop of cloak, the sprite heads around his neck rattling against the giant toenails. After them, yelled the Witch Smeller. Magic hunters, onto your horses. Fairy catchers, have your nets ready. Giant killers, sharpen your axes. We will hunt them down. The Witch Smeller vaulted onto the back of his horse, and with terrible cries the hunt poured out of the castle gates. The enchanted door was so small in the distance now that it was beginning to disappear into that great dark greenness. After it raced the magic hunt, the raving dog, wolves barking as mad and out of control as if they had seen a fox, the insane scream of the Witch Smeller at the front, his cloak flying behind him as they charged after the door and into the forest. I don't know if you have ever seen a hunt in full cry, but it is truly a terrifying sight. The hunt is going to tear Witch to pieces when it catches up with her, said Drama with satisfaction. It most certainly will not, said Queen Sycorax grimly, for I will reach the Witch Smeller first. Warriors! She stamped on the royal stage once, twice. Up and on your feet! Saddle up my hunting horses. There's no time to lose. We have a princess to catch. And that's where we're going to leave that. And I will see you tomorrow. Goodbye.